just heard a song from the Jesuit Music Ministry. Follow jescom.ph on Spotify and Jescom Music on YouTube. We are also on iTunes and Deezer.
Radyo-Katipunan is now online. See our live feed on facebook.com/radyo-katipunan. Check out our Instagram and our Twitter at radyo-katipunan and subscribe to our YouTube channel at radyo-katipunan FM for more exclusive content.
Calling on all young male professionals. Do you wish to live an extraordinary life? Are you tired of the routine and mundane and long for a dynamic, adventurous, and even dangerous life? Do you wish to make your life count and hope to make an impact long after you're gone? Do you wish to live a life of service to society, to country, and to dear Mother Earth? Then you are the one we are looking for. Consider the Society of Jesus. Join the Church's gallant army and turn your world upside down. Call the Jesuits Vocations Promotions Team 426-6101, local 3406. Once again, 426-6101, local 3406.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ear.
Do you long for a good spiritual read? Or for literature that not only feeds the mind, but nourishes the soul as well? Do you want to be inspired, feel positive and hopeful about life? Then read The Windhover, the official magazine of the Jesuits in the Philippines. Written by Jesuits and their lay partners, The Windhover features real stories about the Jesuits and their various ministries. Be inspired. Be blessed. Subscribe to The Windhover. For inquiries, call the Philippine Jesuit Aid Association at telephone numbers 426-6001, locals 4890 or 4892. Once again, Philippine Jesuit Aid Association, telephone numbers 426-6001, locals 4890 or 4892.
Radyo-Katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo-Katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo-Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle.
Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atin sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela. Radyo, radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero sugo, todo sa kayod, tunong at tulong. Ipag the Blue Eagle, galing hiding at tigil.
Baka naman pwede.
Baka naman pwede?
Baka naman pwede. Mga isyung napapanahon ating pag-usapan. Baka naman pwede. Gamit ang mga pananaw mula sa iba't ibang kalinangan.
Baka naman pwede.
Mula sa Institute of Philippine Culture, kami inyong samahan, tayo'y maghuntahan. Dito lang sa Baka naman pwede. Tuwing Huwebes, alas 3 ng hapon, dito lang sa Radyo-Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat.
Nakikinig kayo ngayon sa Baka Naman Pwede, isang programa ng Institute of Philippine Culture at ng radyo-katipunan. Ako si Skilty Labastilla, mananaliksik sa IPC at guro dito sa Ateneo de Manila University. Ako po ang isa sa inyong makakasama sa susunod na oras. Sa mga listeners po natin at viewers, hello po. Salamat sa pagsama sa amin ngayong hapon. Please let us know where you're watching from para mabati naman namin kayo. Feel free as well to share the stream and tag your friends and family para makasama sila, no, na mapanood kami sa ating pangatlong episode. Sa mga first time nating makasama, ang Baka Naman Pwede ay isang programa ng IPC na naglalayong mapag-usapan ang mga isyung hinaharap natin sa kasalukuyan. Ginagamit natin ang lente ng aghampang lipunan o social sciences upang mapag-isipan at mas maunawaan ang mga isyung napapanahon. Nais din naming mapagnilayan ang mga bagay na baka naman pwedeng tingnan muli, pag-ukulan ng pansin at aksyonan. Itong episode po na ito ay bahagi ng 61st anniversary ng IPC ngayong September. So, isang taon na pong senior citizen si IPC. Kaya abangan ninyo kami, may mga exciting kaming mga nakasalang na talakayan at kwentuhan sa mga susunod na linggo. Nitong nakaraang 2 linggo po ay ang kwentuhan natin dito sa programa ay ang papel at tungkulin ng aghampang lipunan, no, o social sciences sa panahon ng pandemya. Itong nakaraang episode hosted by my colleagues in IPC, si Nino Labiste at Melissa Lau. Ang naging kakwentuhan po nila ay si Dr. Tina Montiel, no, isang batikang psikolohista ng Ateneo de Manila University. Marami silang napag-usapan at ako mismo ay maraming natutunan, no, sa talakayang iyon ni Dr. Tina. Tininan po niya yung communication ng local governments ng Metro Manila sa Facebook, no? At kinumpara yung mga pronouncements ng local government sa mga comments, no, sa mga hinaing, mga hiling, no, ng taong bayan, no, doon sa Facebook comments. So, nakita natin yung pagkakaiba ng discourse, no, nanggaling sa gobyerno, iba yung priorities nila dun sa mga gustong mangyari ng taong bayan. So exciting na research at hopefully we'll get to hear more from Dr. Tina because it's an ongoing research, if I'm not mistaken. Ngayon naman sa episode natin na pinamagatang KakaiBabae, patuloy ang ating kwentuhan tungkol sa mga issue sa pandemya ngayon, sa partikular sa papel ng kababaihan. Nagbabago nga ba ito at paano nagbago ang mga komunidad dahil sa mga kababaihan? Muli po sa ating mga viewers sa Facebook, please feel free to leave comments, your questions during the discussion. Babasahin po namin ang mga ito sa ating Q&A mamaya. Alright? Sige, so simulan na po natin. Ipapakilala ko po ang ating mga panauhin ngayong hapon. Ang una po nating special guest ay si Prof. Mary Racelis, research scientist at former director ng IPC at also professorial lecturer sa Socio-Anthro-Dep ng Ateneo, Department of Socio-Anthro, and UP Diliman's Department of Anthropology. Si Mary po ang pinakauna kong boss, no, sa IPC, no. Ako ay fresh grad at bagitong research assistant sa IPC. Siya po ang director noon. Syempre malawak na po ang karanasan niya sa pag-aaral at pagsuri sa buhay ng maralitang tagalungsod, no, at pagtulong sa kanila na mas mapalakas pa ang kanilang boses at para maiugnay sila sa pamahalaan, sa akademya at sa mas malawak pa na sektor ng civil society. Ang research career po ni Mary ay kasing lawak ng 61 years of existence ng IPC kasi isa po siya sa mga pioneer researchers, no, sa IPC. Good afternoon, Mary.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Happy to be here.
All right. So ang susunod nating panauhin ay si Dr. Nathalie Africa-Verceles. Si Natsi ay kasalukuyang director ng Center for Women's and Gender Studies ng University of the Philippines. Nagtuturo din po siya sa Department of Women and Development Studies at dati siyang tagapangulo ng Doctor of Social Development Program ng UP CSWCD. Ang kanyang mga pag-aaral po ay nakatutok sa gender and development at gender and the economy. Si Natsi ay kasalukuyan ding treasurer at member ng Board of Trustees ng Likhaan Center for Women's Health, isang organisasyong nagsusulong sa kalusugan at karapatan ng mga kababaihan sa mga marginalisadong komunidad. Siya rin ay treasurer at member ng Board of Trustees ng Women's Studies Association of the Philippines. Good afternoon, Natsi, and welcome to the show.
Magandang hapon po, Skilty, Ma'am Mary, at sa lahat po ng nakikinig at nanonood sa Facebook ngayong hapon. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, sige. Simulan na po natin yung ating talakayan. Excited po ako sa topic ngayong hapon. Sige, simulan po natin sa unang tanong na sa pagkumusta, no, sa kababaihan natin. Paano ba naapektuhan ng pandemyang ito ang mga kababaihan? Sinong gustong mauna?
Sige, Mary, ako ba magsisimula? Sige po. Okay. So, hindi po naging madali, no, ang pandemya para sa mga kababaihang Pilipino kasi hindi lang siya nag-generate ng isang public health crisis kundi panlipunan at pang-ekonomiyang krisis din. At alam natin na ang bawat krisis ay ibang epekto sa mga kababaihan. No? Mas sinasabing disproportionately affected ang mga women dahil sa gender roles, norms, saka yung unequal gender relations na kahit sa ordinaryong panahon ay nakakadulot ng diskriminasyon, marginalisasyon at subordinasyon ng mga kababaihan. Tapos napakahalaga rin pong ipunto na ang mga kababaihan ay hindi homogeneous, hindi sila pare-pareho, no? Dahil pinag-iiba din sila ng ibang identidad na panglipunan, social identities, no? Kagaya ng class, ethnicity, religion, disability, age, SOGI. Kaya dapat sensitibo rin tayo, di ba, sa mga hamon na kinakaharap ng mga kababaihang may iba't ibang subordinadong identidad, no? Na sinasabi rin nating subjected to intersectional marginalization. So imagine mo, hindi ka lang babae, kundi mahirap ka, may kapansanan ka, matanda ka, etc. So siguro mabilisan lang, no? Skilty, pasadahan lang natin yung naging epekto nung pandemya sa mga kababaihan, no? Tapos i-take note po natin na at the very least nag-i-intersect ito with class, no? So hindi lang gender kundi class. So it was found that the pandemic has exacerbated existing gender inequality. So this is manifested in the loss of income and employment. Kasi nga women are overrepresented in the informal economy, di ba? And then they're also in the formal sector, many of them are employed in the service industry, and services and retail, as we know, were the first to be hit by the pandemic. And then also those who are in MSMEs, no, particularly micro and small enterprises, also were affected because of temporary closures or even permanent closures, no, and a drastic reduction in revenues, no, for their enterprises. Tapos yung intensification ng reproductive burdens or the work women do in their households. This was significant because, as we know, women bear the multitudinous forms of care and maintenance work, di ba? That they need to do for their families, no, which involve tending to all the family members, cooking, cleaning, and other essential daily tasks. Tapos, because of the unequal gender division of labor, they are viewed as principally responsible for this work. Okay, and it becomes much heavier in situations such as pandemics because children are always at home and doing remote learning. Health systems are overloaded. Essential services such as daycare centers and basic healthcare are closed. And then we think about the women in the sandwich generation who have to take care of both older and younger generations, but their aging parents and also their children. So sometimes they have to exit from the labor force in order to meet the increased demands of their reproductive work. Another is increasing incidence of gender-based violence. So women and girls face heightened vulnerability to gender-based violence, which can worsen at home, yung domestic violence, because you're locked down with your perpetrator. And then there's domestic stress, of course, because of economic insecurity, health and safety concerns, and other stressors. And then it's difficult for survivors to report abuses, because how do you find privacy from your abuser if you're in confined spaces with them? And then how do you seek help from friends, family, service providers, etc.? And then another effect is reduced access to sexual and reproductive health services because of disruptions in service provision. And lastly, perhaps not highlighted enough also, is the effect, particularly on women's mental health, of increased stress and anxiety coping with these onslaught of demands on their time, their energy, etc. So essentially yun yung mga kinakaharap ng mga kababaihan.
Thank you, Natsi. Maraming nabanggit si Prof. Natsi na epekto ng pandemya sa kababaihan. Babalikan natin yung ilan sa mga ito. Pero sa perspective mo, Mary, based on your studies, your contacts with women in the informal economy, ano yung naging epekto ng pandemya sa kanila?
Yeah, yung sinabi ni Natsi is very appropriate din sa urban poor communities, lalo na sa kanila. Nung nalaman ko that we have this session tungkol sa kababaihan, tinanong ko, I asked yung isang meeting ng mga urban poor women leaders na kilala ko noon pa, para magtanong lang ako sana, what's their view? Bakit ako ang magsasabi? Anong mga views nila? Siyempre, you can get it from research, di ba? That's what we do. But yung mga bosses nila talaga on these questions, because alam ko yung mga questions na ito. So, tinanong ko sila. No? So, that's the first question was, what was the impact of this, ng pandemic sa inyo? And, they looked and they said, ay nako, Aling Mary, kahirapan. Di ba? Kahirapan, that's our everyday life. Kahit na before yung pandemic, ganun na. Pero ngayon, napakahirap, sobrang hirap. That's what they said, no? And then one said, alam nyo, kami ay nagiging collateral damage na naman sa kinastress ng pandemic. It's always us where the largest responsibility falls to somehow cope with these happenings, no? So to summarize that, it's we always, urban poor groups, they are of course mixtures. Not all are sobrang poor, some are okay din naman, as they say themselves, but they have a hard time. It's always a struggle. It's like every day is an emergency, right? For some reason, So every day is a struggle, but some make it, unti-unti they make it. But then when something like this happens, especially in lockdown ngayon, where they couldn't move, that really trapped them, as Natsi said, in so many ways. So to summarize, they already had a life of hardship for many of them, varying, but this created such a difficult, even more difficult life, taxing them, their strengths and capacities and roles even more. And I think that's some of the things I would like to mention, some of the things they said during our meeting, during this discussion. Yan.
Thanks, Mary. So yeah, nakita natin na malaki yung impact talaga ng pandemya sa kababaihan. Sabi nga ni Natsi kanina, it exacerbated the pre-pandemic problems that women were facing. Balikan ko lang yung nabanggit mo, Natsi, kanina na yung term na intersectionality, kasi baka bago siya sa karamihan sa atin, no? Paano mo ipapaliwanag yung konsepto ng intersectionality at bakit mahalaga siyang konsepto sa pag-intindi sa sitwasyon ng mga kababaihan?
Oo, maganda nga na pinunto mo yan, Skilty. Kasi ang intersectionality po ay ang pagtanaw na ang bawat tao ay hindi lamang iisa ang binibitbit na identidad, di ba? So, kahit babae ka, di ba? Kahit mga babae, pinag-iiba rin sila ng iba't ibang identidad. So, ang concern talaga ng intersectionality as an approach ay yung mga identidad na subordinado, that are subordinated. So kung babae ka, okay, that's on the basis of gender, you're a woman. Pero meron din kasing other identities, gaya na nabanggit ko kanina, no? Merong age, merong socio-economic class, merong ability or disability, merong ethnicity, may religion. So yung intersectionality, tinitignan po ang epekto, no, ng mga subordinadong identidad, no? Ano ang epekto ng mga sistema kung saan nakapaloob ang mga subordinadong identidad nito? Kasi bawat identity na to ay may sistema pong pinapalooban, di ba, na merong domination tsaka may subordination. See, so if you imagine all of these identities and if they're all subordinated, see yourself, no, as being embedded in these systems of oppression and experiencing, di ba, kasi your identities have an impact on how you are viewed, treated, understood, di ba? How you are how you face life in general, di ba? So pag marami kang subordinated identities, nire-reinforce at saka nag-i-interact yung impacts. Hindi lang siya additive Ang sinasabi nga, hindi lang siya merely additive. The impacts really converge, they interweave, they co-constitute each other. So very complex ang interactions. So talagang kailangan sensitize tayo Nang babae, kalimitan hindi lamang babae yan. Meron pang other subordinated identity na may sariling set na mga hamon. Diba?
Right.
So kailangan alam natin yon.
Right. So yun nga, na-reinforce yung sabi mo kanina na hindi homogeneous, no, yung experiences ng kababaihan. Gusto kong maintindihan yung kanina may mga nabanggit si Mary na yun nga, mas lalong nahirapan yung parang yung burden of taking care of the households, of managing the households, parang heavier on women. Bakit kaya ganito, Mary? Bakit ibig ba sabihin parang may free pass yung kalalakihan in thinking about the welfare of the family dahil parang domain na siya ng babae yung household?
Well, that's the division of labor, yung traditional division of labor. But yung nakikita ko sa communities is it's changing because of the situation, no? In fact, we asked, why, all right, we heard, no, women, all of this and so on. Ano bang ginagawa ng mga lalaki? And they said, they're looking for work or baka ngayon nagtatrabaho na yung mga iba, ang layo-layo, nagbibisikleta sila, and so on. So it's not even a clash among them as such, no? But they're supposed to be looking for work. That's their job. They have to earn. We will just earn on the side. That's the concept, no? So at least we can get baka food for tonight kung walang pera yung asawa ko or yung partner ko. So we always have to make up for the difficulties had, but it's his job to supply the family with livelihood, really. That's his job. But they see themselves as doing the support roles only sa totoo. Often they're doing the major roles dahil walang trabaho yung tao, yung lalaki, then gets into inuman and sometimes drugs. So, ayun, wala na. And it's always the women who have to make do. No? So it's not that they're very understanding of. I mean, they accept that he has lots of problems because they're always fighting because and bring off. So, but they know that he's supposed to do it. So he has to keep looking for money for something, family. But in the meantime, whatever he does, we have to make sure that may pagkain ng mamayang gabi yung mga anak ko.
Right.
Skilty, may I add?
Yes,
may
please.
I add something to what Ma Mary said? Kasi we were in a discussion with women entrepreneurs yesterday. And I found that they were really going into new businesses. Particularly yung cooking, baking, plantita. May ganun pa yung sa plants, ma'am.
Yeah.
So they have been stepping up, doing, entering livelihood activities that are aligned with what they would normally do in the house, di ba? Yung pagluluto, di ba? Tsaka pagbe-bake. So they are contributing to the household income. Tapos tinanong ko, Nay, sino ho yung gumagawa ng gawaing bahay? Dahil kung nagkakaroon na ng pandagdag po na ginagawa, sino po yung sumasalo ng reproductive work? Sabi niya, ako pa rin.
Yeah.
Diba? So, binabalanse ko lang yung oras ko. Nagagawa ko naman lahat. Sa ilang oras pong tulog na nakukuha niyo sa isang gabi? 4 na oras. You see? So, it's still time poverty for women. They step up, but they still have to pay the price. Diba? Yun. I think importante kasi very rigid kasi yung gender division of labor na yan. Na basta care, work, and households, women.
Kaya nga. So, inisip ko tuloy, paano kaya yun? Paano kaya ma-break yung ganong klaseng pag-iisip na nakatali sa kasarian mo yung magiging trabaho mo sa bahay, di ba? Dahil ba yan of course, dahil galing sa sinapupunan ng babae yung bata, so baka sabihin na merong maternal instinct to really take care of kids and manage the household. Pero paano maisip ng Pilipino na hindi necessarily tied to one's gender yung paggawa ng mga gawaing bahay? Pwede ring gawin sana ng mga kalalakihan.
You have to change norms,
if I can
gender.
just,
Sige, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Mary.
Not just that, I'm thinking of examples, no? That you see changes now. Something yung kahirapan forces you to do different things. And they will often say, yung asawa ko naglalaban naman dahil dito ako sa palengke and I'm looking for scraps to bring home. So, as long as they sort of get together, they value being together, very many of them really do help out in household chores, looking after children. It's not the normal or the norm in the sense of everybody's doing it, but here and there, when the need comes, they're there. Where you see that a lot is when there's a bagyo coming. I remember one mother saying, alam mo, that it's coming already. And so when I see pag yung tubig ay nasa first step, ayon, tawag na lang ako sa asawa ko, you have to come home dahil nasa first step na. So it's very clear. He has to come home because they have to move stuff, the heavy stuff is what he's going to do. So, there's very often a partnership, and we find that many times the men really are doing some of the things that were traditionally women. I think one example, some of you maybe know, especially if you're in Baseco, we see women are peeling garlic all the time. That is a major income source. They get so little, and imagine peeling garlic all day, but that's their fallback if they can't find anything else, because usually hotels and restaurants still need garlic. And they said, kahit na, peeling garlic, ayan, sumasali na yung mga ibang lalaki, sumasali na. In other words, it's normally demeaning for him to do garlic peeling because that's what women do as a last resort. Pero the times require it, and some of the men you interview them, they say, kung kailangan talaga, ganun lang, So there's a lot of flexibility depending on the situation and the relationship of the woman and the man.
Nathalie, you were talking about changing norms?
Yeah, norms. Yes, pero I'm finding that among the younger generation of men, mas open sila sa mas equitable sharing of domestic tasks. Pero I'll also say that we have seen in some instances that because men have been forced to stay at home by the quarantines, they have actually taken up some of the work that women do in households. Nakikita nila doon lang nila finally na-appreciate na marami pala. Kasi nakita na nila firsthand because they were there 24/7, di ba? Then they really had to contribute already. Pero every time daw, yung narinig ko pag nag-end na yung quarantine, kasi di ba nagbubukas na naman, hindi na naman sila tumutulong. Alam mo yon, so they help kasi nga hindi yan expectation of them. So it's still voluntary, but for women, it's compulsory. I think that's the distinction. Yes, required, ma'am, kasi it will be left undone otherwise, di ba? All this work. So yun yung kaibahan. Yun ang kaibahan. primary
It's
responsibility
like sa
ng women yan.
mga,
Mary?
mga course outlines natin. There's required readings, there's recommended. Ganun yun.
Yes.
Ganun yun.
Right.
Ganon.
So may nakita tayong ano, no? Yun nga, sabi ni Natsi yung na-realize ng kalalakihan na hindi pala madali itong gawaing bahay, no? Dahil nandoon na sila, nasa loob na sila ng bahay ng mas matagal na panahon. Balikan ko, Natsi, nabanggit mo kanina yung gender-based violence, no? May datos na tumaas yung kaso ng gender-based violence nitong pandemic. At kahit na hindi masyadong sa kaso ng Pilipinas, parang hindi masyadong mataas yung difference ng pre-pandemic at ngayon, pero alam din man natin yung culture of silence, 'di ba, sa pagdating sa karahasan. Anong nagiging alternative outlet ng kababaihan ngayon, or kung may naririnig ka bang may mga organisasyon ba na nagsasagawa sila ng parang rescue efforts para lang mabigyang pansin itong mga babaeng nakakaranas ngayon ng karahasan sa kanilang pamamahay?
Oo, Skilty, actually, yung huling datos na nakita ko, bumaba ang bilang, yung naitalang kaso. Pero hindi ito nangangahulugang bumababa ang insidente kasi hindi nga nakakapag-report ang mga babae. So, marami ng referral pathways actually. 'Di ba? Kasi dapat yung mga VAUSI desk bukas 'yan. Hindi naman dapat nagsasara 'yan. So, bawat barangay meron, 'di ba? Pwede ka naman mag-report sa barangay mo. So, hindi dapat na disrupt yung ganoon. Pero sasabihin ko rin, maganda na rin banggitin ko ngayon, yung UP Center for Women's and Gender Studies, nag-partner kami with Professor Sabrina Gacad, ng Department of Women and Development Studies. Colleague ko kasi siya co-faculty ko siya doon. Nag-establish siya ng Lunas Collective. Yung Lunas Collective is a feminist volunteer-operated chat service that aims to support victim survivors of GBV and individuals in need of reproductive health advice during the quarantine. So yung service na to, accessible via Facebook Messenger. Kasi marami na kayo nagfe-Facebook, di ba? So you just send them a message. Para lang alam mong meron kang matatakbuhan. Kasi kung di ka makalabas ng bahay at meron kang access sa internet, magme-message ka lang, di ba? Matutugunan ka na agad. So may mga ganoon. There are.
It's good to know, no?
Yeah, organizations that are helping.
Na banggit mo rin yung kasama doon yung reproductive health services doon sa hotline na yon.
Advice lang. Pero for
Advice.
instance, yung Likaan Center for Women's Health, 'di ba binanggit mo kanina sa intro ko na
Yes.
I'm on the board and I'm also the treasurer. 26 years old na nga pala kami, no. So our services continue during the pandemic. And Ma'am Mary is also a very good friend of Likaan. So hindi tumigil ang serbisyo niyan. So family planning, maternal and adolescent reproductive health, may birthing, rooming in, treatment and counseling for victim survivors of GBV. So we remained open throughout the pandemic except na nagkaroon kami ng COVID cases, no. Pero 2 linggo lang nagsara. Pero all throughout, since March last year, we've remained open. So meron namang natatakbuhan ng mga kababaihan kung alam lang nila kung saan sila pupunta. Diba?
That's
So
nice
you have to
know.
get the information out. Yeah.
Right. Mary, may datos ka tungkol sa reproductive health ng kababaihan ngayong panahon ng pandemya? You're still muted, Mary.
Nakamute ka, ma'am. I think nakamute pa rin si ma'am.
Yeah.
Pero let me see her.
Ayun.
Ayan.
Okay. Again. Datos natin, I mean, I don't have the statistics of the communities I know, but so statistics about what? Sorry, what did you say? Or datos
we were
about...
talking about reproductive health services available to women right now in the pandemic. Because I know, example, that you were part of that group of people who
We're
pushed
both ends.
for the bill, right? So I know it's very close to you.
Well,
Have
actually,
there been updates since then?
yeah, it has improved, but you have to keep a lot depends on the local government, whether they make it all available. But for me, and that's going, but the women's organizations like Mikan and many of them are pushing. To me, what now is the emerging or has emerged as a kind of another issue from that is teenage pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because that is rising. We are, I think, the highest or second highest.
Second in
right?
ASEAN.
Yeah, in ASEAN. So the question is why but the perspective, at least of groups like Mikaan and advocates of our age, is you don't take a blaming approach, to the young girls. You have to find out why did it happen? Because sometimes they say, well, I fell in love. I mean, I'm going to wait till 18 until I get married, because theoretically that's what I think is the case. And they relationships. And so love is really it. And they feel that to express one's love, they get into sex, but it's just part of a whole thing, right? I mean, they really see it differently from the previous generation. But my concern, and one of my students is doing a study of that, is the 10 to 14-year-olds who are getting pregnant also. And that, I think, is another story, mostly, because probably, we're not sure, a higher proportion are a product of incest and rape. And we don't know, because of the COVID, did that increase during this time? And so we're trying to find out, and then now we're focusing on it, but that is kind of the latest iteration of another set of issues in our age. Because of course, the whole one of the debates is, should underage girls or less than 18 have access to contraception? If even women married, there was such a controversy about that. What about those under 18? So, have to resolve that problem. Although I think, at least with private, maybe Nazi knows this, I think with the private clinic, they can give contraceptives if the girls ask for it, with or without parent consent. I'm not sure. But the whole issue of parent consent, that's all unclear. So Nazi is the expert on that one.
Ma'am, kailangan ng pag minor, kailangan ng parental consent. Kahit private clinic. Sila baka makasuhan. Yes. Pero Skilty, we have to also talk about the women who have been playing significant roles in responding to the pandemic. So we want to highlight the work of our women frontline healthcare workers.
Right,
diba?
right. So
especially
I understand you're doing research on that. So can you talk a bit about women leaders based on your research?
Before the leaders, I want to honor our frontline workers. Okay lang kasi because they are overworked, underpaid, they're still waiting for their risk allowance, hazard pay. I mean, we really feel for them. Okay, so I would like to say we are with you, we stand with you, okay, and we honor you and your hard work during the pandemic. Okay, so we did research on our women leaders. Kasi we have what we call the Angat Bayi, Women's Political Empowerment Fellowship Program. It's actually a capacity building program for incumbent women provincial board members, city and municipal mayors, and vice mayors and councillors. So a few months into the pandemic, this was last year, we investigated the COVID-19 responses of our fellows who are mayors and also one of our mentors. So Mayor, I'll mention their names kasi ang huhusay nila. Mayor Trina Formalo Fabic of Romblon, Mayor Vivian Alvarez of Eastern Samar, Mayor Marcel Cumpio Avestruz of Leyte, and Mayor Crisel Lagman Luistro from Albay. So we found very distinct ang responses nila. We didn't see this at the national level, except sa office ni VP Lenny, who's also a woman, incidentally. So they acted swiftly, decisively, proactively, particularly in preventing the entry of COVID in their areas, which we should have done at the national level, diba? And then they utilized participatory processes in decision-making. They ensured clear communication with their constituents. Important yun, diba? Because you have to inspire their trust and their cooperation. So they use social media, radio and TV, loudspeakers in the barangay with looped recordings of the same messages. Naka-loop pa ulit-ulit pamphlets, and then they also made the rounds of the different barangays and made themselves available in responding to queries. And then importante, maganda to eh, they exhibited creative thinking. So how? Yung sewing of face masks and PPEs as livelihood projects. And then they purchased local agricultural products using calamity funds and then included them in the relief goods and food packs. And then, basta there were so many, the poorest of the poor were employed as relief packers, no, in exchange for food packs. And then this is what we found, really, no, the gendered socialization of women as women proved invaluable because they acted with care, compassion, sensitivity, diba? And then they were meticulous, detail-oriented, taking mental health of the frontliners, their constituents into consideration. And they also ensured continuity of services for maternal and child health, for VAU survivors, and then they responded to the intersectional needs of their constituents. No? So solo parents, older persons, breastfeeding mothers, persons with disabilities. So nakita mo parang very distinct, parang gendered yung response. Kasi they were all based on that ethic of care, diba? Into, ma'am, it was so interesting, ma'am, yung socialization natin as women are actually resources that we can utilize in crisis situations such as the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Yes, Mary, please.
Now, to build on that, looking at where are women very strong now in management all over the place, in hotels, restaurants, resorts, all the service industries, which are now big and huge, and they manage enormous budgets. Why? Because they, it sort of emerged as part of their role. They know it. They have the discipline and management skills from the time they were 3-4 years old. As young girls, they already learned those skills: detail orientation, focus, but do many things. Multitasking, that's another thing we do well.
Tama yan.
So all of that has now come into play nationally. We still need more in the political domain, but that's coming also. But certainly in the economic business sector, certainly the micro and even larger enterprises are very much women, because it's a service economy. We're in this neoliberal type society where services have become the major concern rather than manufacturing or even agriculture. So that's where women's learning from childhood just blossoms once they get the training and education. But the same is true about, in the urban poor communities. It's so astonishing to me all the time that the ones who emerge are women leaders. And are they elected leaders, not in the sense of the mayor or government officials, but they're elected by their own communities, right? So they are chosen leaders, and they are amazing. They do the same things. They're the first to worry about there's ayuda, or there are food packs, especially in the early days when they didn't know how they're going to eat and they were locked down. They were organized, so they would find out, all right, who is getting the food packs? Okay, sila. Who's not getting the food packs? Who should be getting it? And then they managed that, because it's going to take a long time for the next supply. They discussed with the women who got it, could we share it with those na walang wala? And they did that. They managed to get the whole community element working, because that's what women do well on the interpersonal side. It's just incredible how many of these community activities that happened because the women were there, and because they feel that's part of their role. Although even these leaders we talked to, they said, lalong dumami yung mga requirements sa amin, but we're willing to do it because it has to be done. That's what they said. Dapat talaga, So that
this is really great, no? Yung isang nabanggit kanina ni Natsi na phrase na ethic of care, no? It resonated with me. Inisip ko tuloy, the world would be a much better place if it's run by women, right? Kasi there is really that care, no? Pag babae yung nagmamanage ng mga bagay, no?
Teka muna, Skilty, kailangan Skilty, I have to interrupt ha. Kasi remember, socialization ito ha. Hindi tayo born. Women are not born
Yes,
naturally
that's
like
very
this,
important.
okay? We were enculturated into this. If we can learn it as women, men can also.
That's very
okay,
important.
learn behavior to. Okay. So
Yes.
yes, the world would be a much better place if we socialized men and women in the same way. No, if we socialize
That's a
them
very
as we do our
important point, Natsi. And actually,
Yeah.
it leads me to my next question about the role of men. No, you mentioned earlier, in a private conversation, we need more feminist men. No, so my question is, again, nabanggit mo kanina, no, we need to change norms, but what are some examples that concrete examples that you can dispense, advice to families, no, in rearing boys to become more caring, right? Kasi nga hindi necessarily tied sa genitals yung pagiging caring, right? Hindi siya natural. It's really socialization. So if both of you can provide some recommendations probably to families right now, to want to raise their boys to be feminists.
Ma'am Mary, do you want to start? Ma'am Mary.
Well, yeah, at least one has to be that you don't, from early childhood, separate that the girls stay home and do all the home tasks. The cultural side of that is boys, are supposed to know what the outside world is like, because they have to get trabajo eventually. So they have to grasp it, and so they have to know that world. So that's okay. They go out. You don't have to even as such, But the girls, you have to train them in how you manage a household in a neighborhood and so on. So that kind of division, I think now is really not appropriate anymore. The world is changing, and into a more compassionate world. I think that's one of the themes I hear all the time now. If this COVID ever ends, or even if we have to live with it, it has to be a fairer world, a more compassionate world. And compassion should not be just the role of women, for heaven's sakes. It should be the society, And so men have to come into that, I think. And so others, parents, can have discussions. I mean, I have somebody, I know who was a, household driver, and a church group had a gender sensitivity for men. And so he asked permission to go, and he had 3 days off. When he came back, he said, "Ma'am, iba talaga ito." So so now hindi pala pwede yung dadaan yung babae na maganda and I whistle at her. Hindi na po pwede na, So this is the first time he ever thought of it in a way that was appropriate for men, But how, you don't want to make it. You don't have to be like a woman. There are certain common values. And I think parents are the first to have to do that. But sometimes you have a lot of groups that come in to help with, gender discussions of issues like that. But even, let me just give you one example of one of my grad students did a study in Binangonan, that area where it's semi-rural, but it's already very urban also. And a lot of micro enterprises which women are handling. And what the traditional micro-enterprise donors always worry about is the women seem to get to a certain level and then they kind of stop. And they wanted to find out, why is that? Because they're doing so well, many of them. And one of the things that this guy found was women still want to deal with the household. In those cases, the men were really doing a lot of the household work because she was earning a lot, pretty well from the micro. But she was uneasy that she wasn't doing her proper role with the children and the household and the husband. And so she maneuvered it, or many of them maneuvered that they get the husband to become either the president or the marketing manager. If it's a sale, he gets the title of marketing manager dahil he knows a lot of people. Yun ang kanyang strengths. So she tries to build up his strength in an area where he can be useful, but it's still part of the micro enterprise, which is really a family enterprise. She doesn't see that as a business only. She sees it as a business of the household. and that's where she tries to fit the husband or partner into it so that his dignity remains, because that interaction has to be solid, and yet he's playing a part in the family income, especially if he wasn't earning anything before.
Nice, Mary. Natsi, from your end.
Siguro, quickly na lang, we have to start them from birth. So don't color code your children. Basta be mindful that we're not supposed to place our children in boxes. Tsaka baka pwedeng tigilan na yung mga gender reveal parties na yan. Kasi hindi pa nga napapanganak. Di ba kinakahon mo na yung bata?
Yeah.
Di ba every person should have the freedom to do and be who they want to be, di ba? Without being restricted by cultural dictates on the basis of your sex assigned at birth. So that's how I would raise my children. I would let them feel free to be, okay? And at the same time, respect others' freedoms to be, irrespective of their gender, class, race, ethnicity, religion, ability, disability, ethnicity, age, education, etc. You have to teach them about equality, that everybody is equal.
You know, we should ask Skilty. He did research on male roles in urban poor communities. You should be the one to talk about the males, because you're the one who has the data.
No, but yeah, I agree with everything that you said, no? about involving men in the discourse. No? My research basically looked at young men as they transition to adulthood and the roles that they think they need to play as men. But yeah, I think most of the things that you've mentioned earlier have captured many of the lessons I've learned from them. I think at this point we can go to questions from our listeners and viewers. One of them sent her greetings. Emmeline Versosa, hello po, from Vegan City. Dati daw siyang nasa taga-IPC, na early 80s, infant feeding research. Hello po, Ms. Emmeline. Another question from Facebook. Do you know her, Mary? Do you remember her? Emmeline?
Yeah,
yes,
that's Mien.
All right. Yeah.
She was the former executive director of the Philippine Commission on Women.
Yeah.
She was also a deputy director, I think, in the UP Center for Women's and Gender Studies.
Oh,
Pero she was
nice.
affiliated with the center.
That's nice to know.
Friend namin yan.
A question from Facebook. Is the pandemic solely to blame for these things that happened to Filipino women, or do you believe that the national government and particularly the president is also at fault? I think this was from an earlier discussion. Who wants to answer that question?
Si Ma'am.
Natsi.
Mary.
Nagpapasan.
Yeah, ikaw muna. You always talk about the big issues. I like to look at the little issues.
Sige. Is the pandemic? No, of course not. That's why we pointed out that the pandemic exacerbated existing gender inequalities between women and men. So nandyan na yan. Pre-existing na yung inequalities na yan. So pinalala lamang siya ng pandemya. Okay? So yung tanong tungkol sa may kasalanan ba ang pamahalaan, partikular ang presidente. So kung titingnan natin ang tunay na kalagayan ng mga nahihirapan. So sa tingin ko, kung rights-based approach po ang ating lente at duty-bearer po ang Estado, sa tingin ko meron po silang pananagutan sa paghihirap na nadaranas ng napakarami sa pagkasalukuyan. Yun po ang aking position.
Well, you know, where I really fault the government, well, drawing from the president, is the way they look at communities. You know, when you always hear pasaway, you know, because they're of that case with the jeepney drivers who were protesting and trying to get some coins for them to eat. I mean, that was a dramatic display. But to give this view of pasaway, you know, to just designate communities like that without recognizing the strengths of communities, and especially the women who are working there to organize to make a difference. And that's why I think a lot of the pandemic still continues, because the huge majority of people who are in communities have not been brought into it except under police or military if they do something wrong, so-called, right? I mean, that's not the way you bring out the capacities of people, is you trust them. You trust them, and they have to trust the leaders. If they don't trust the leaders, they're not going to follow, right? So you have to build up your trust with people. And I would say government has a long way to go on that. Although there are many, of course, exceptions. Huh?
Right. We have another question. Is it possible to build a more compassionate country with more feminist men with our current president?
Grabe kayo magtanong ha. Talagang gusto niyong ipasok yung ma'am. Can I start? I'm currently doing a research on feminist men. Okay.
Yes,
and
please.
I believe that we can build a more compassionate country kahit sino pa yung presidente natin. And gusto ko lang sabihin, kung yung presidente natin ay may pagkukulang, lalo na natin kailangan ng higit pang mas maraming mga lalaking feminista. So kaya po natin, 'di ba? Pero pagtsatsagaan po natin, yung mga may alam na po tungkol sa feminismo, Kasi it's our responsibility to raise critical awareness. So the task is ours to win over more, not just feminist men, but also feminist women.
I think and any president and all the way down has to look at what's happening at the grassroots sector, not just urban, poor, but rural and, indigenous and upland. You have to know more from the ground. There has to be ways to listen, to hear what people are saying, and that they can speak freely, that they feel they can speak freely without being, somehow attacked. That's really crucial, that bond of trust between the citizen and those who are in those positions. Otherwise, you lose the tremendous capacity and of millions of people who live in communities.
Siguro quick question, last question before we synthesize. You mentioned, Nathalie, something about building more or creating more feminist men and feminist women. Kasi ibig sabihin, hindi automatic yung pagiging babae, hindi equal, no? Hindi pala equated parate yung pag babae ka, automatic feminist ka. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Of course, iba ang feminine sa feminist.
Yes.
Okay, so karamihan ng babae feminine, pero hindi ibig sabihin sila ay feminist. Kasi to be a feminist, that means you have an awareness of discrimination against women, women's oppression, exploitation, marginalization, subordination, etc., and taking action to end this. Diba? And I always extend that nga, kasi nga intersectional feminist ako, so we have to look similarly and care about all other systems of oppression based on other identities. So, no, not all women are feminists. In fact, many women have internalized sexism and misogyny, Skilty. So these are also the women we are trying to reach. But we don't blame them kasi this is our enculturation, diba? Our socialization. We have so much to unlearn and to learn. We only ask that men and women, please open your minds and your hearts kasi we are introducing perhaps ideas that are totally different from what we have all grown up learning. So yun lang. Pero talaga, meron kasing nasasaktan ng mga tao, di ba? So dapat tayong kumilos. Kasi people are suffering, discrimination, abuse, and violence. So this is not acceptable. We must do something about it. That should be the impetus to become feminists. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, let me take it from the other end. For example, again, when we asked some of the women yesterday, where do you feel your rights somehow being undermined? They said, when I say what roles have changed, they said, wala naman, only in education. They said, ngayon, because of the online training, ako naging teacher niya. Grade 2 lang ako. Siya grade 5 na. Paano yun? Right, so dilemma, stress, dahil she can't produce. The other part of that was she said, now I have to stay home and supervise yung mga grade 2 hanggang 4 kasi now they have e-tablets, right? They've been given e-tablets by the government to do their studies. alam nyo, if you don't watch it, those kids are, first time they ever had one, so they're playing games the minute you're not looking. So dapat andun ka sa bahay watching them. Yung mga grade 5, 6, 7, okay na, pwede na sila. You can check later, they do their work more or less. They said, so bakit, ako nang ako. And that's what I think government has a role in recognizing that systematically they have placed enormous burdens on women because of the cultural expectations. And the men are not going to have, because they don't have the patience or the beliefs that they should be the ones training their kids, because they're likely to get angry and impatient and yell at the kid, which the mother is more patient, etc. So by definition, this whole system has added, that's where added roles have come in. That is a role they didn't used to do, just generally supervise. But now, naging teacher pa rin ako. Ano ba yan? Hindi ba may teacher sila? Grade college pa sila. Pero ako ang teacher nila, and they're saying, what is this system that creates? They know there's a pandemic, but couldn't there be some other solution? So of course, many of them, as they say, the ones who are better educated, they said they just do, ako na lang gumagawa ng homework niya para matapos yan, then I can go out and sell my goods, no? So you have to know that reality of life among those who will be affected by, things like government programs. You have to be closer to the grassroots and understand the varieties. And that's why social scientists are crucial here, anthropologists, psychologists, sociologists, and so on. Which is why I always get so angry when I attend big government policy things. And who's there? All economists, mostly men, unless it's on environment. And they're all making these decisions. And when you raise issues of, communities, gender, they say, yeah, CSO, yeah, that's very important. But they never invite any of us to join their sessions, right? So, this is a divide also in the larger part or the other part of the culture, the failure to recognize in reality what is going on in the ordinary people's homes and communities.
All right.
Mabilis lang, idagdag
Yes, please.
ko, mahalaga din ang gender specialists.
Gender specialists.
Yes. Diba?
Yes, also.
Diba, ma'am? Okay.
Yeah. But you have gender, they come from, usually from these social
different
sciences,
disciplines.
diba?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so ako po, busog na busog po sa discussion ngayong hapon na ito, no? Sayang we don't have a lot of time. May mga tanong pa sana akong gustong itanong, pero baka sa susunod maimbitahan ulit natin ang atong mga panauhin natin ngayon. Basically, ang nangyari po ngayong hapon ay napag-usapan nga natin, no? Yung buhay ng mga kababaihan ngayong panahon ng pandemya, na nabanggit kanina yung pagpapalala, no, exacerbation of the situation of women during the pandemic in terms of their economic situations, unpaid care work, gender-based violence, in terms of reproductive and mental health. And then daanan din natin yung diskusyon tungkol sa papel ng kababaihan in leadership positions, no? So in within families, within households, in communities, in the front line of medical field, as well as in local governments and national government. Mahalagang papel yung ginagampanan ng mga kababaihan. And then the last part of the conversation ended with a challenge, no, to families and men to be more caring, no, and for families to socialize and enculturate their young boys, no, especially to have that ethic of care, no? That's almost parang expected of women. Before we end, I want to ask our guests one final statement, no? Siguro we'll start with Nathalie and then Mary. If I am gonna ask you one recommendation to either government or to anyone listening to us today, dugtungan nyo yung phrase na baka naman pwedeng with your recommendation. Sige, Nathalie.
Sige. Sa konteksto to ng pandemya, no, at nauukol din sa sinasabing how can we build back better? Kasi ayaw na natin bumalik sa dati. No? Baka naman pwedeng sabay-sabay nating ipaglaban ang hustisyang panlipunan. Dahil isang makatarungang lipunan lamang ang makakatiyak na may pantay na katatagan ang lahat sa anumang krisis. Yan.
Very nice.
Maraming salamat po sa paanyaya.
Thank you. Mary?
Kanuman, baka pwedeng bigyan halaga ang pagkilos ng mga kababaihan sa komunidad. Simple lang pero complex ang kanilang ginagawa. So, no? Ito, yun ang suggestion, recommendation ko.
Salamat, Mary. Again, thank you so much to our guests, Prof. Nathalie, Natsi Lourdes Racelis, and Prof. Mary Racelis sa pagpapaunlak sa aming paanyaya. Maraming salamat din sa ating listeners at viewers ngayong hapon na ito. May gusto ba kayong batiin, Mary and Natsi? You wanna greet
no,
someone?
lahat lang po na nagtiyagang manood. Mag-ingat po tayong lahat. Bawal po magkasakit.
Yeah.
At saka register to vote.
Yeah.
Hanggang September 30.
Ako, in solidarity ako kay Natsi.
Thank you. All right, so samahan muli ninyo kami next week, alas 3 ng hapon dito sa Radyo Katipunan, 87.9 FM. Sa susunod na linggo po, makakasama natin si Patrick Manuel ng Pantawid COVID Project at si Gwen Vasquez ng Ateneo de Davao University. Pag-uusapan natin yung papel ng youth organizations, political participation at Philippine democracy. Baka naman pwedeng i-like nyo rin ang Institute of Philippine Culture sa Facebook para sa iba pa naming announcements at events. Ingat po tayong lahat at laging tandaan, kung may gustong maunawaan, baka naman pwedeng pag-usapan. Hanggang sa susunod at maraming salamat.
Thank you.
Baka naman pwede.
Baka naman pwede.
Baka naman pwede. Mga isyung napapanahon, ating pag-usapan. Baka naman pwede. Gamit ang mga pananaw mula sa iba't ibang kalinangan.
Baka naman pwede.
Mula sa Institute of Philippine Culture, kami inyong samahan, tayo'y maghuntahan. Dito lang sa
Baka naman pwede.
Tuwing Huwebes, alas 3 ng hapon, dito lang sa Radyo Katipunan, 87.9 FM.